To the people that are just joining, if you just give us a couple of minutes just to let's say to make sure that we've got enough people who said they were going to join. So if you just hang on for a couple of minutes, please. Good morning to those people who've just joined. We're just trying to, let's say, we're just hanging on for a couple of minutes just to see if any more people are going to join. So if you just please wait a couple of minutes. Thank you. Okay, as I said, I'm just going to give it 30 more seconds before we start. So for those people who who've just joined, we're just seeing if any more people are going to, if anybody else is going to attend, join. But I'm gonna give it till 30 seconds, one more minute, and then I will start the event. Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to make a start there. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to Measuring Users' Comfort in Autonomous Vehicles, a HumanDrive webinar. My name's Bob Bateman. I'm the senior engineer based at Cranfield. So senior engineer for Nissan, sorry, based at Nissan Technical Centre Europe, based in Cranfield. I was also the project lead for the HumanDrive project. So a little bit about the HumanDrive project, let's say itself. If you go to the next slide, please. So the HumanDrive project was a government-funded project through the Centre for Connected Autonomous Vehicles and through Innovate UK. Started in July 2017 and run through to March 2020. You'll see, I said, from the project, there was, let's say, you see the consortium partners there, 10 partners, Nissan, the OEM, and then we had, let's say, various, let's say, suppliers, SMEs. We also worked with, let's say, several academic institutes and catapults, and in there as well is Highways England. So the two presentations today will be from, let's say, two of the partners, the Connected Places Catapult and the University of Leeds. So some of you may have seen in the main media thrust of the HumanDrive project was the event that took place late last year, beginning of 2020, which was the Grand Drive event, which was a 230-mile autonomous vehicle journey from our site in Cranfield to our manufacturing plant up in Sunderland. The most complex and longest journey in the UK to date. But that was only one of the deliverables that we achieved on that project. There was around 120, 125 deliverables that we achieved over this project. You'll see from this slide all the additional other stats. We had 0 road accidents, 135 people working on the project, and actually 360 trial participants to assess human driving behavior. So there currently are, it says 6 patents pending, but there are 6 patents issued, and there are some additional IP that we are still currently looking at as well. The other important item is the zero there. There was 0 road accidents or 0 injuries or anything to do, let's say, overall safety during that project and that activity, which was very important, particularly to Nissan, but also to CCAV, UK government, and the other consortium partners. Now, you may be asking yourself, the CCAV projects, aren't they all the same? Isn't it the same thing doing autonomous driving? What was unique about this project, and the clue is in the title, is human drive. We were trying to attempt to bring a humanistic approach to autonomous driving, how to make it more comfortable, and as well as safe. And for Nissan, this is quite important because it basically gives us a head start against the competitors to bring a vehicle that delivers autonomous vehicles, delivers safety, but does it in a comfortable way. One of the comments that I always mention is we wanted to take it from being a taxi service to an expert chauffeur service, and that's what we were trying to do. And the 2 presentations you're going to get today focus on that area. The work done by CPC and Leeds, we're looking at the humanistic activities. So with that, enough from me. I will now like to hand over to the CPC, who are going to give the first presentation.
Thank you very much, Bob. So I'm Jammie Champlin. I'm a principal technologist at the CPC. So today I'd like to take you through some of the basic sort of introductory elements around the concept of comfort and how some of these factors have been derived, an introduction to the human drive trials themselves, what was performed and executed, then the key findings that came out of the study, along with some of the verbatims directly from the participants that were experienced the drive itself, and then identifying some of the areas of further research that have come from a number of bits around the literature, as well as the activities we performed. So the Human Drive Project, as Bob alluded to, the 30-month project developing a system to enable this long distance journey across the UK is it included the development of an advanced control system, and that was to help the AV emulate natural or human-like driving style. A key enabler of this was the integration of an artificial intelligence controller developed by the team at Hitachi, and this utilized artificial neural networks, or ANNs, and deep learning to help with perception and decision making. So what was interesting around that in terms of the perception and decision making was to understand what do humans do, and how does this relate to human experiences. There are things that people like, they dislike, there's nuances and subtleties of what drivers do in a really rather complex activity, and a lot of us perform this today in driving a car. There's so much information that we process from information we see outside the vehicle, so objects in the road, animals running across or flying nearby, to the information that we have inside the car on all the different displays, the sounds that we respond to, the feedback that we feel through interfaces and controls like the steering wheel or pedals, or through the seats even. So comfort in itself, what is it? Now, this is a really interesting one that's constantly sort of discussed over in the research, and definitions aren't really widely agreed. It's often about whether or not there's comfort or discomfort, and whether or not they're at poles of a single construct, or whether or not they do actually coexist. From one perspective, it's possible also to view comfort, especially in autonomous vehicles, as a combination of like the several mechanical and external forces on a vehicle. So taking into account things like longitudinal and lateral movement, particularly acceleration, so the rate at which a force is applied, and jerk, when the force is rapidly stopped or an opposite force is felt. So basically for us, it's kind of the side to side, the forward, the backwards, and the stopping experiences that we have in a vehicle. There's then vertical loading. So this is like the up and down motions. So thinking about how a vehicle responds to things like going over bumps and how smooth one might perceive a road surface or road quality. And then there's a lot of work there in refinement around suspension systems and ride height and dampening, different approaches to suppressing different impacts, like feeling of being on a wave or on water. So position in the road, where is the vehicle physically located in space? What is the vehicle relative to? How well does this position relate to in reference to other vehicles or other objects or the lane markings? Then thinking about the different types of maneuvers that are performed. So is a vehicle sat in the middle of the lane, for instance? Is it just cruising along, or has it encountered another vehicle? Is it performing an overtake or turning at a junction? How is the vehicle approaching this situation? We have weather conditions. How does the weather impact? Is it going to impact visibility? Is it going to be snowy? Is it going to be rainy? Does that affect your levels of grip, for instance, or your ability to see the markings on the road or see through your window? How comfortable does that make you feel? The presence of other road users. So are there any other vehicles in proximity to the vehicle or people? How close are they? Are there many of them around, and what size are they? Is it a large lorry? Is it a cyclist on the side of the road? Is it sheep in the middle of the road, like in that image? And thinking about what the road environment itself is like. Is it smooth tarmac? Are there clear markings? Are there clear road signs or not? One of the interesting challenges of the UK for sure. So additionally to those external factors, it's worth considering how an individual perceives a situation. And this is where there becomes a lot of psychological and experiential elements of how we see the world. And it's where boundaries of comfortable, uncomfortable, acceptable and unacceptable start to formulate. And this one is one of the few things that is actually commonly agreed, is that comfort is quite subjective and can differ between individuals. So it's often influenced by the physical, physiological, psychological factors, and often on a continuum, as it's something that is continually evaluated. Right now, you might be sitting in your chair, and you could be shuffling right now. You're shuffling in your seat, and you're adjusting to different pressures put upon you. You might have an injury or an ache that's causing you to shift in your seat, and this is very personal to you right now, and what you have discomfort, or your feeling of discomfort, or how you perceive that. In terms of AVs, autonomous vehicles, and the behavioral comfort, there's also potential for stress or tension that can arise from unexpected or unpredictable or unclear actions, and that's often due to no physical control from the end user. So thinking about the individual, physical and environmental conditions, so things like noise, vibration, harshness, which are the traditional measures, thermal and lighting. How well does a seat form around the physical form? What is the temperature of the vehicle like? What is the lighting conditions internally and externally to the vehicle? What are the acoustic situations like? Is it noisy? Is it quiet? Can you hear different elements of the vehicle working? Familiarity. How well does the occupant know the surroundings and the behaviors of the vehicle? Are they familiar with the road that they're on? Do they know the road markings, signage or layout, the information that's around them? Do they understand or know how the vehicle could perform under different conditions? Personality traits. What are the motivations or habits of people? How do they respond to different situations? What do they generally like or dislike? How do they deal with what's in front of them, and the combination of different factors all together at the same time? The age of someone can play a factor, and how someone is, how physical or mentally capable someone is, you know, how vision, reflexes or flexibility has been impacted, determines some of the comfort. In terms of age, there's different levels of experiences that have either been acquired, learned, or lost, that enable people to have mental models on how to deal with different situations and scenarios. And then there's personal driving style. People might like more aggressive styles or more defensive styles, and how do people like to be driven? What habits have people picked up over time, and what level of risk do they like to take? And some of this might well be unachievable in different scenarios, and that's another challenge with AVs is how it adapts to what's in front of it. So these factors should really be considered, you know, as scope for some of the further research. So comfort in AVs, it does join a rather large body of existing research around comfort, and there's varying levels of fidelity or realness to these sort of studies. There's different representation of autonomous car users, so the different types of people, which will help to build more evidence really to understand what people want and to explore those factors as I identified in the previous slides. But some of the most interesting research around cabs is the new set of challenges that they introduce. I mean, there's all sorts of aspects as to what preconceptions will occupants have of the way that AV drives. Is it too slow? Is it too fast? Is it too risky in places or too placid? Continued challenge to get what's right for everyone. The occupant now is also really a systems monitor. So they don't have the same level of physical control that they used to have. They don't have the same feedback that they'd be getting when they drive a vehicle. So they can't rely on all the same senses that they used to have of touch or haptics and proprioceptive feedback, or the feedback through the movement of their body. They instead rely a lot more on the ability to respond to information fed to them via alerts or warnings and cautions, and then through the user interface, or proactively or preventatively intervening. There's a high likelihood that the occupant will actually be out of the loop. So they might not be engaged in the driving task itself and not attending to the vehicle or road conditions. And this will mean that the occupant needs to get really rapid sort of situation awareness. So how do they attend to different sources in their environment, and then making rapid decisions and intervening in a correct sort of manner. There's new seating configuration. So it's possible that AVs will bring a new dawn of vehicle design and layout. Something that's often mentioned, you hear about how the occupant might not be positioned in the traditional position with sort of greater drive-by-wire controls and the vehicle taking greater autonomy or decision making. Then the combination of all of the above things bring into the questions some of those challenges around safety, and then for the ability of the user to actually intervene correctly or accurately. New driving positions and non-driving tasks in particular then start to introduce more areas of motion sickness, often related to cues or lack thereof, to enable a person to either anticipate future movement or being able to fixate on static points of reference. So a lot of the current research has focused on that traditional seating, and there's an opportunity really to look at novel vehicle configurations, and then thinking about how the management of ride comfort is done, and how this is further explored. So some of the mitigating strategies. So in order to mitigate some of these challenges around comfort and discomfort, there have been different discussions on how to approach this. Route planning is one that's been identified in terms of how to optimize the path that's taken by the vehicle. And this could be particularly important with large fleets under control and the ability to influence a significant number of vehicles to help either avoid scenarios and to to identify how to optimize the comfort or reduce discomfort. Vehicle design, so this can support the user as much as the challenges identified in the last one. Visibility could be maximized to enable clearer views through the vehicle. The environment could also be optimized for personal preferences, and greater levels of personalization can lead to more options or selectable options within the vehicle to enable comfort levels to be adapted. These are all the different touch points that a user can engage with. Once they're in the confines of the vehicle, there's varying levels of configurability through seating and the lighting, sounds and environment, as I mentioned previously, to try and help. And then that combined with good HMI or human machine interfaces, these can help provide system information, situational awareness, and good design can be the difference between success and failure, or being able to perform an action in time or not. There's new technologies in this space around augmented reality or see-through displays that can really help enable information to be overlaid on the real world, and an opportunity to help with occupant anticipation and understanding through reducing that vehicle discomfort. So this conceptual framework by Deals in 2017 helps to summarize a number of these elements into a single space. It's focused around shared autonomous mobility, but it does explore some of the interrelationships, and as a conceptual framework, it's really there to influence future designs and to stimulate sort of further research. And it takes into consideration all of those elements, such as the physical well-being, things from good support to the body and the amount of energy exerted by the occupant, to establishing things like peace of mind through secure storage, or developing trust and providing good HMI for the occupant. Proxemics, so describing the feeling of autonomy over the space, such as seats in the HMI, enabling segmentation of zones so that you can get that personal space and support specific scenarios. Usability, making something effective or controllable, and the ability to be effective, efficient, gaining satisfaction in performing an activity, and also with accessibility, making it easier for everyone to use. Pleasure, so what's the ambience like? What level of stimulation is there? What information is infotainment systems are available, and haptics. Social, so a mixture of preferences, the ability to mix with others or not, or seeking your own personal space. Something really important that we've heard from the accessibility community is actually having that physical contact or contact with others. And then there's opportunities where actually you'd want to be kept isolated with the current conditions of COVID. And we're seeing that about the less sharing or wanting to socialize. Aesthetics, so keeping something clutter-free and clean. And then association, so what sort of symbolic or personality is there behind the vehicle. So you can actually, this would relate to a lot for the OEMs in terms of the actual products and the personality and the branding that you can actually get behind a vehicle. So going on to things around brands and delights, this model here is around product development and customer satisfaction. So the Kano model in 1984, he identified ways that features can kind of help a product or service to improve satisfaction, and he identified 5 constructs, 5 categories of customer preference, and the ability for them to create satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Those are areas such as performance. So what are the requirements right at the top of the customer's mind? Basic, so what are the things that are kind of expected or taken for granted? So the hygiene level of expectation. excitement, so the ones that are unexpected, pleasant surprises. Indifferent, the more neutral requirements that customers not really care, they don't really care for. And then what are the reverse elements where actually they cause dissatisfaction when present and satisfaction when present. So it highlights that really over time, user preferences change, and that's very much the point about comfort, is that it's a continually changing element. There's things that were once innovative that end up becoming viewed as a basic requirement, and this will happen as technology develops. So this is something that should be done throughout the technology development, is reviewing where is the baseline of comfort now, what are people expecting, especially under different scenarios and different use cases. So taking you through the actual HumanDrive trials that we performed themselves. This was the final trial that we did was in January 2020. An advert was placed out for people to apply to participate in an AV trial at Cranfield University. We were keen to really get a representative spread of people from any age group, but focused mainly at people with some driving experience and with a valid driver's license. And that was mainly so that they could participate in one of the conditions that we had during our trial. 20 people overall participated in the trial, and 12 were asked to provide detailed feedback in an interview to help understand their experiences and thoughts throughout the drives. There was a spread between ages of 20 and 60 throughout the trial, and those were the people that were just available on campus at the time. There was a mixture of different backgrounds in the participant group, and we asked them also about their views or understanding of CAVs, and that was found to be very mixed as well. The trial structure itself is split into 5 key sections. The recruitment questionnaire, where we looked into demographics, vehicle use, people's experience, and as I mentioned, the experience or attitudes towards automation. The interview, which was an initial interview to understand views towards new technologies, how they felt again about automation and autonomous vehicles. So really starting to delve a bit deeper into their level of understanding. There were 3 driving experiences, of which I'll go into a bit more detail in a moment, but 2 of the drives had questionnaires pertaining to their experience, and then during the drives, participants would also give verbal feedback, and they had a handheld controller to be able to give feedback as to key markers of positive or negative experiences. There were a couple of questionnaires as well afterwards about how they felt about the drive or their experiences. And there were 3 personality questionnaires. So one about the locus of control, so the amount that someone believes that they are, or whether or not external forces beyond their power have control over what's happening in their lives. And then driving behaviors, how do people actually behave on the road, or what do they like, what don't they like? And then sensation seeking, what sort of thrills, or how many thrills are they after in life in general. After these trials, a few of the participants, as I mentioned, were asked back to provide a bit more detail of their experiences on some of those markers in an auto-confrontational interview. They talked through some of the events and feelings and how realistic they felt the trial was. So the trial was conducted at Cranfield's Multi-User Environment for Autonomous Vehicle Innovation, MUAV. This is a purpose-built facility for developing autonomous solutions. There's a number of sensors and cameras around the roads, and this was all under control by the trial staff, and that enabled us to manage a number of variables in the environment, in particular the movement of traffic, although that wasn't always able to be completely controlled, as humans are still humans and we have the odd person wander on. The team at Cranfield helped execute that. James Brighton, Kim Blackburn and Simon Stranks and their team. So the participants were exposed to three main conditions: driving the EV themselves, a Nissan Leaf, riding as a passenger with the HumanDrive Project team taking the driving task, and then riding as a passenger in the HumanDrive AV. These conditions were sort of randomized to eliminate order effects, and the number of laps, as I said, were kept fairly consistent unless the participant wanted another familiarization lap, or if one of the laps was erroneous by either a vehicle or person walking onto the course. In terms of the 5 conditions themselves, the vehicle would start at the top at the blue dot and then drive down the road, down to the roundabout and back up again. The first lap had no staged interactions. The second one, the vehicle passed a pedestrian and had an oncoming car. On lap 3, there was the pedestrian on the side of the path as well by the road, and then 2 parked cars for the vehicle to overtake. Then on this one, there was an overtake on the bottom, and then an approaching car at a T-junction, and then a pedestrian standing at the bus stop. So, as you can see, there was a lot of positive feedback. The project team have really developed quite a successful algorithm in that it felt safe, and the majority of participants reported that they felt safe or comfortable in one way or another, which was reassuring. So what did they do right? So there's a general sense of positivity towards the behavior of the vehicle and the confidence in the way that it handled the scenarios around the test environment. It's important to remember that it was a test environment. The remarks identified that there was an opportunity really to influence the perception of CAVs, and positive experience like this it's really possible to enable people to start developing their views on how this could impact their lives, and to develop a level of trust in the systems and subsequently comfort with the way the system's operating. The level of comfort people were gaining was actually on quite a short exposure. If you think about the 5 laps that they had, this already started to help build trust, and it's something to be noted that there's an opportunity there, that the more exposure, the greater the opportunity to build that. As you can see, also motion sickness or travel sickness was mentioned by one of the participants, and they had a susceptibility to travel sickness. And with the potential of more non-driving tasks, this is an area of opportunity for further work. And some of the comments and the expectations of people that actually there is going to be more that you can do on long journeys, and that that designers are going to integrate these features into a mobile office, and attending to children or traveling drunk. It makes you think, actually, how do we mitigate against car sickness or travel sickness, and being able to anticipate what the vehicle is going to do. And this other verbatim about the performance reminding of a learner driver with the potential to become great or confident with experience. So again, that developing maturity, that developing experience, gaining greater comfort and greater confidence in what could be done. So scores were did well, but it didn't quite match the human-driven vehicle just yet. And the findings sort of, as I say, had overwhelming support for feeling safe, natural and comfortable. And this was encouraging, that people were so optimistic of the autonomous technologies and how responsive it was. The trials demonstrate that there is value in maturing the system over time and refining the responsiveness and the behaviours of the vehicle. So developing confidence that a passenger has when there's a human in control. There's always ways for a human to be able to respond to a passenger and adapt their driving on the fly, really. The current system predominantly focuses on external conditions, which doesn't really focus on the person inside as much. And this is a way that future systems actually may evolve, with the vehicle looking to engage with the passenger, or having a more passive component that kind of, or do we see the human as a more passive component that just experiences a drive and will accept that what's being performed? Behaviors like showing intention, braking, accelerating, acknowledging the presence of pedestrians, or showing that they're looking at obstacles, making eye contact with people and letting them pass. Those would all help. Familiarity also enabled, as I said, passengers to get used to the interfaces, the noise, the sounds of the AV, starting to build a mental model of how it could behave in different situations, and that helped to gain greater ease. Feedback and information of the vehicle's intentions, obstacle detection and current state, and feedback of the system state will be also really helpful. And at the moment, having a controlled environment and a safety driver was also something that was really helpful. So some of the biggest barriers that the participants identified that technology had to overcome: public acceptance of the vehicle, with a vehicle able to drive in a manner that sort of suits a number of different users or being personalized. That will be a real challenge. That paired with the potential of a mixed fleet of human autonomous vehicles is a continual area of interest for the community. Integrating this into wider systems, especially connectivity and enabling real-time intelligent route planning, adjusting to temporary road layouts or complex environments like the ones found in the countryside, make the UK still such a fascinating space. Perception, decision-making, and knowing what the vehicle knows, knowing that it has the best available data that's valid, that enables it to make effective and efficient decision-making, and then understanding the permutations of all these different variables coming together and how it will respond to it will be also interesting. So areas of further research. So validating these findings with actual AV users and a wider set of occupants and test conditions. A lot of research at the moment has also been performed in hypothetical use cases or simulations or demonstrators. So real world testing will be of real value. Further research should also look into other wider areas of comfort and how these systematically influence each other, and how these may adapt over time. The CPC, we're working on a project called VeriCav, which is also exploring comfort further and using different methods and to verify different use cases. Also, comfort should be considered early on in the development stages and design, so you can track it all the way through as more systems are developed and deployed, as comfort's largely going to be influenced by performance and excitement features, and it'll be expected as standard by the customer. It's not static, and these factors will change over time. Also could be an opportunity to look at how to tailor comfort to different preferences of individuals, and then the service offerings that could be provided by different companies, and branding and modeling, and how you could differentiate either sportier models or comfort models around some of these factors. So in summary, it's a really complex area. Objective and subjective data that helps to draw this together. We're just really exploring some of the comfort elements, and it needs to be used in conjunction with the other research and work that's being done out there. There's opportunity to optimize the design of vehicles for the occupant. Demonstrations have been really impactful, and it's really starting to help influence public perception and gaining comfort around that. Still some mixed views, but there is an opportunity to really influence through useful and usable systems, and there's much to explore. And on that note, that here endeth my section, and I shall pass you over to Natasha, who the team at Leeds did some further in-depth research in this space. Thank you.
Good morning. Sorry about this. I'm just trying to get my microphone and video working, although it says that my video is not working. So I'll carry on without the video. I'll just share my screen again.
You just share your screen, Natasha.
Yes, I'm just getting it going. Sorry. My video is stopped by you, I think. So I'll just assume that's okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, if you just put it into presentation mode now.
It is.
There you go. That's perfect.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about the technical issues at the start. It's lovely to see so many familiar names on the list in the audience. Thank you, Jammie, for providing a really nice overview of comfort and the HumanDrive trials that were conducted at Cranfield. Thank you also to the CPC for arranging this webinar. So I'm Natasha Merritt. I'm at the Institute for Transport Studies at the University of Leeds. And I'm going to give you an overview of one particular study that we did in the HumanDrive project. I should add that basically we worked very closely with the CPC and their trials at Cranfield, and we tried to basically create the same version of what they were doing in the real world and in our driving simulator. I'm not going to go too much into that, but lots of papers coming out in the next few months on that. So before I start, sorry, I just had a okay, I just want to say thank you to the Centre for Connected Autonomous Vehicles and Innovate UK for sponsoring this work. The work that I'm going to be presenting is mainly covered in this paper that came out in Information a few months ago. It was led by my PhD student Vishnu, but actually there's a large number of people at Leeds working on the HumanDrive project who are named here, and some of the work that Vishnu is doing is actually sponsored by Seeing Machines, and the paper actually has Mike Lene from Seeing Machines as one of the co-authors. Okay, right, so comfort. Why do we need to measure comfort in automated vehicles? Well, at the moment, or certainly when we started this project, automated vehicle controllers, they're quite accurate in terms of lane keeping and obstacle detection, but their behavior is quite mechanical and machine-like and not really similar to how we as humans drive. And the question we asked is, does this matter? Do users of AVs want it to be like they're driving or want it to be more machine-like? So that's one of the main questions. And we wanted to also know whether there is something about particular types of drivers and how they like AV driving styles. So different types of drivers, different ages, different personalities. Do they like different driving styles from the AV? And finally, most importantly, and what I'm going to be focusing on is how do we actually measure participant comfort? So there's one thing saying that this is comfortable or it's not comfortable, but actually from a human factors point of view, can we actually measure that? So Jammie's provided a lovely overview, but just a few words from me. It's actually quite hard to quantify comfort as far as the human factors is concerned. So looking at the literature, there's some really positive affective words used like pleasant and harmony. So this is something from the 1986 paper by Slater. More recently, Beghiato et al. Have done quite a lot of work on this area, and they use words again, pleasant state, relaxation, confidence in safe vehicle operation, and absence of uneasiness and distress when they talk about comfortable. There is apparently a good correlation between trust, acceptance, and comfort, according to this paper by Siebert et al. And they also say that actually it's probably easier to talk about discomfort rather than comfort, because it's easier to see the signs of discomfort and measure and these compared to comfort. Comfort is also thought to be associated with factors such as mental workload, stress, motion sickness, anger, and fear. And you can see, therefore, that it's a bit of a woolly area when we're trying to say, is this comfortable or not? Lots of different words come into our minds when we think about comfort. So what about the driving style and how that affects our comfort or not? Do we prefer our own driving style when it comes to automated vehicles? Let's just describe what we think driving style is, or how it's been described. Things like preferred speed, threshold for overtaking, headway distance of the vehicle, etc. But the results are mixed in terms of whether or not we prefer the AV driving style to be similar to ours or something else, and whether that means it's comfortable or not. So in the HumanDrive project, our first study, we looked at actually people's manual driving, and we collected their sensation-seeking scores, which, as Jammie mentioned already, is around, whether we like risk-taking or not. And we found a good correlation between high sensation-seeking and high preference for speed. So especially for those under the age of 40, those who had a higher speed in the driving simulator were also high sensation seekers. So there seemed to be some correlation there in terms of personality and how we drive. However, when it comes to other studies, and certainly this one, for example, in automation, drivers were asked to judge a replay of their own drive and someone else's drive. So there were young drivers and older drivers, and both drivers' driving was replayed back to them. And in this study, young drivers preferred their own driving style, but actually older drivers preferred the young drivers' driving style. And this paper suggests that perhaps the older drivers preferred aspects of driving that they were no longer able to repeat themselves. So there's some differences there between whether we prefer our own or someone else's respect to age. Another study, and there's a few, but I'm just giving you some examples, was looking at aggressive versus defensive, and they very sort of briefly and broadly describe aggressive as sort of higher speeds driving and defensive as lower speed driving. And this study showed, they looked at sensation seekers again, and they showed that those with high sensation seeking and aggressive drivers and defensive drivers both preferred the defensive driving style. So even if they were aggressive themselves and liked to speed, they preferred an automated vehicle that was acting more defensively and did not speed. So, excuse me, Jammie's mentioned a little bit of this, but I'm going to go through it in a little bit more detail of how we describe comfort in driving, how do we manipulate comfort in driving. So generally speaking, this paper by Sumala et al. Describes a comfort zone where we like to keep a safe margin to road edges and obstacles and other vehicles when we are driving. So that's how if we're driving comfortably, that's what we base our around our sort of zone of comfort. And then discomfort is then associated with road furniture, such as you can see here, roadworks or parked cars, high hedges along the road, and also road geometry, so sharp curves. And so we created this sort of environment in our simulator. Discomfort is also associated with a higher magnitude and frequency of jerk and acceleration in the road, especially associated and linked to motion sickness. And there is actually a paper by Eriksson and Svensson that describes, quantifies what level of jerk and acceleration is acceptable. So anything below 2 meters per second squared for acceleration and 0.9 meters meters per second cube for jerk is recommended to make sure that the comfort of that ride. So knowing this information, going through what we did in the HumanDrive studies, you might have, if you've come across the final event slides, you might have seen this particular slide. I'm just going to go through it in more detail. So we started off by basically excuse me, asking 44 drivers to drive our motion-based driving simulator, and we collected their manual driving data, introducing them to a variety of environments, which included these aspects of comfort and discomfort. So having parked cars and sharp curves and high hedges in rural and urban environments. And that data, as I say, was collected from 44 drivers. We then used that data to create more human-like controllers. And I'm not going to go through the details of how we created those controllers, and there's some papers I can refer you to understand more about that. What I'm going to focus on today is then what we did was evaluate their response to these human-like controllers in the study that I'm going to describe now. So here they are. So just going into more detail. So this just gives you an overview of the sorts of things the drivers experienced. So you can see kind of straight roads with low hedges, cars on the road, roadworks, sharp curves with no hedges, parked cars, and so on. And this is what they experienced. So all drivers, this is for the sort of second study where now they were sitting in automation and they were evaluating the controllers that we developed. So all drivers started off by having a manual drive. So they drove the road that we'd created manually. And this was used to record their driving, and then we replayed that driving back to them without them knowing that this was their driving in automation. So that was one of the controllers that they experienced. They also experienced two controllers, this human-like controllers that we developed, which we called slow and fast AV. And you can see here, the red one is the slow and the blue one is the fast. And they also finally experienced a kind of off-the-shelf lane keeping assist system, which had no human-like behavior. And that's the green one here. And here they experienced this in rural and urban settings. So you can see the rural settings. Ooh, rural settings and at a higher speed, urban settings. So they had two rural and two urban environments, and you can see how the controller is behaving. And I guess one of the things you want to notice here is that there is a big difference in the rural versus urban setting, and also across the controllers there is a big difference for the LCAS, which is the off-the-shelf controller, compared to the more human-like controllers. So this is just really to give you an overview of what they experience in terms of the controllers. And just one final thing is the threshold that you can see for the acceleration, and you can see when it's below and when it's above that threshold. And in this, as I said, there was various parked cars and roadworks, etc., for both rural and urban environments. So this slide you might have seen, again, if you've come across the HumanDrive Project presentations, gives you an example of what it looked like for going past a parked car. So these are the two controllers, the red and the green are the controllers that were modeled and played back to drivers. The replay of their own drive, you can see there's a variety of behaviors from the humans. And finally, the conventional AV controller could not actually manage going past parked cars. So we didn't actually have parked cars, so it just basically followed the road. So what did we measure and who did we measure it on? We basically had people, 24 drivers, 14 males with decent age across from the public, driving, experiencing these controllers. They had sort of good driving experience. And what we asked them to do is basically use a very simple Xbox controller to evaluate the controllers as it went through the various rural and urban settings. So they would hear a beep in the drive, which lasted about sort of 20 minutes or so, lots of beeps in the drive after certain sections, the straights, the curves, the parked cars, etc. And all we asked them to do was press the right button to say, yes, the AV's behavior felt safe and comfortable, or no, it did not. And for this particular study, we didn't really describe what we meant by safe or comfortable. And as this paper was around the physiological metrics, I'm going to just quickly describe that we used the BioPack to measure their heart rate and electrodermal activity. So just quickly on the physiological angle, just for those who are interested, we collected, as I said, heart rate and electrodermal activity, and I'm going to focus only on the skin conductance response for this particular presentation. So for electrodermal signals, there is a slow changing tonic component, which basically lasts for a long time, and then a rapidly changing phasic component, the SCR, or the skin conductance response. SCL basically takes, as I said, changes over a long period, but SCRs are very useful for this kind of study because they show fluctuations in the ADA signal due to a short-term stimulus. So changing, for example, from a straight section to a curved section, or with no cars to parked cars, you can see a change or existence of these SCR. And they are very good because they have a much shorter decay, and they really capture this changing environment. So just a note before I provide some results is that basically there is good evidence that there is an increase in the mean heart rate and the SCRs and the number of SCRs per minute as discomfort increases in the environment. So here is an overview, and I'm sorry this is quite loud, and I don't know whether I can take the sound away. I wasn't supposed to be. So this gives you an idea of what the study looks like. You can see our motion-based driving simulator on the right here, and the driver basically sits and simply evaluates, and you can see here they're holding onto the controller and they're watching what's going on, and their foot is not doing anything because it's an automation. This slide just gives you an overview of what the button presses look like. So, for example, this is feedback on the conventional controller, the off-the-shelf controller, and their own replay. And the green shows the positive. Yes, I liked it. Yes, it felt safe and comfortable. And no, I did not like it. Did not feel safe and comfortable throughout the drive. And you can generally see there's a lot more negative feedback for the off-the-shelf one than their own replay. So putting that in a bit more detail, with respect to button presses, across the 4 controllers, so the slow and fast that we had developed, the lane keeping assistant, which was off the shelf, and the replay, even though there was a trend, there was no statistically significant difference in the number of no presses. So here we basically took the overall number of presses and the number of no presses and presented that as a ratio, number of no presses over overall presses, and you can see that although the lane keeping assistance system and the replay had slightly lower number of no presses, so they felt slightly more comfortable, there was no significant difference between them. However, there was a significant difference overall between the rural and urban sections. So we took all of the rural sections into one and all of the urban sections into one, and generally speaking, the button presses seemed to show that there was more, they felt more uncomfortable, evaluated the controller as more uncomfortable, less safe, in the rural section. So even though there were more obstacles in the urban section, the fact that in the rural section it was driving at a higher speed, it had narrower roads and tighter curves, this is what made it more uncomfortable. And there was also an interaction, and basically in this particular areas to bring your attention to is that it was most comfortable in the off-the-shelf controller during the urban environment, but that's almost likely because there were no parked cars. So I think this is the parked cars that made a difference, which were available in the slow and fast and the replay. And the reason we think the button presses showing more comfort in the replay was possibly because of familiarity. There was certainly anecdotal evidence that participants recognized their own driving, even though they didn't know it was their own driving, and felt it was more familiar to them at least, and therefore less uncomfortable. In terms of the physiological response, number of SCRs per minute. There were higher SCRs in the manual drive. So this is now comparing, there were no button presses in the manual drive, by the way, because they were driving, but we could look at physiological response in there when they were driving it manually compared to when automation was on. And generally speaking, there was more discomfort or higher number of SCRs in manual driving compared to the automated drives. But what we cannot tell, unfortunately, here is whether that's because of the physical activity associated with manual driving or actually more uncomfortable. So we need to do more in this area to understand what's happening there. And then finally, very nice to see a good correlation between the SCR per minute values and also SCRs generally, and the button presses, in that, again, rural environment was more uncomfortable, so higher number of SCRs in the rural environment compared to the urban environment. And then finally, we did collect some sensation-seeking data, and this is actually coming out in a paper, hopefully in the next month or so, where there was a correlation between the driver's sensation-seeking and their like for the controllers. So that basically those who were rating their sensation-seeking as low also preferred the slow controller compared to the fast controller. So just to conclude and summarize, a good correlation between subjective button presses and the SCR values, so the physiological data, seem to be good for looking at this continuous changes in discomfort and could be used in sort of studying how people feel in automated vehicles, and it's the good thing about them is that it's real time and you know, not intrusive, but we are sort of noticing that there is definitely more discomfort in the rural sections with higher acceleration, higher speed. So some consideration, I guess, needs to be given to that when developing AV controllers, or how can we make this smoother and nicer and more comfortable. And we definitely need more information and more knowledge on how we define comfort in terms of sort of psychological terms, and on the human factors after that, we really make sure it is comfort we're talking about. So just a couple of more slides left from me. One is around the next study that we have collected. That was the final study almost a month before lockdown. So we were very lucky to be able to collect this data, where we basically recreated the stretches of the road around Cranfield and simulated that in our driving simulator so that we could look at the real Cranfield road. And here we actually used very sort of clear description of comfortable and natural, because we noticed in previous studies people were sort of mixing them up. So we actually decided to look at whether people thought something is comfortable and that's the same or not as natural. So we described it to them and we asked them to rate it from -5 to +5, the driving style that is comfortable, the driving style that does not cause any feeling of uneasiness or discomfort, and then natural, the driving style that is closest to your own driving. And so they were asked to be, again, in the driving simulator, experiencing automated driving once for natural and once for comfortable. And here they were asked to evaluate 3 driving styles. One, which was based on high sensation seekers driving, so kind of faster and cutting the curves more. One, which was based on low sensation seekers driving. And finally, one, which was based on the AI controller, which was developed in HumanDrive. And this is a paper that's being written by a new PhD student of mine, Chen Peng. So she's actually done a very good job, and it's nearly ready to be submitted. And that leaves me to say that this work is now carrying on thanks to possibly the last European funded project that I might have called Shape It, which is a Marie Curie ITN, which Chen is one of 15 PhD students across the European universities looking at automated vehicles and human factors. And as I said, she is looking particularly at the comfort side and really trying to hone down into what does it mean and how do we measure it. Okay, that's it from me, and I leave you with questions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, can I just ask the events team to open up our videos again, please? Thank you. Thank you. So if I ask Jammie to come back online, okay then. Okay, so thank you very much. I've noticed, like I said, a few questions coming through, so I'm just going to start, like I said, reviewing those and asking Natasha and Jammie to answer them. We also have some other supports from the CPC and Leeds here. So if they do answer the questions, if they can come on and obviously introduce themselves as and when that's necessary. So if I start running through some of the questions now, so we have one here. So this is for the CPC. Did you investigate people's trust in the AVs and its relationship with or influence on comfort?
Might have to defer that one to Ellie if Ellie's online at the moment. I don't think we looked at the direct influence of trust and comfort per se. Don't know, is Ellie online?
No, she's not at the moment. So
yeah.
I don't think we could. I can add that actually, when we started this, we were aware that most studies are looking at trust, and we specifically wanted to look more at comfort and natural rather than trust per se. There is a good correlation, as I said, but we specifically didn't necessarily want to look at trust.
Okay, and following on from that, which I thought was an interesting question, participants seem to want to know why the AV had made the decision. Is there a case for the car providing an advanced driving type of commentary drive? So yes.
Yeah, I think this is certainly an area in the human factors community where we're talking about virtual assistants and autonomous vehicles, so VA and AV. And there is really an opportunity here to, Neil, it's a really good point, I think, in terms of giving people that systems awareness and starting to give that commentary as to, hey, this is what I'm looking at, this is what I'm aware of, this is the systems aware, the situational awareness that I've gained as a system and how I play that back. And I think that's really going to be down to the refinement of the HMI, and you could get to a point where you're either sort of data rich and information poor, where you're throwing so much information at people that they don't know what to enact on. So actually where they have to filter through what is the salient, what's the useful kind of information to take away from it. So I think, yeah, that refinement there as to a good commentary, and I suppose it kind of aligns to some of the advanced driving sort of techniques that you see, where people talk about what they see, what they're aware, what they're anticipating, and what they're going to perform next.
I think in the early stages of AV, it's getting people's confidence up, and actually one of the studies that Nissan did, during that project was we asked around the movie test track at Cranfield, we asked people to, let's say, to drive the route themselves, and then basically we either replayed them the way they drove it in AD mode, or we actually did it in a autonomous mode, how an autonomous vehicle would do it, and we asked them to start voting which actually they thought was the best drive. And that's one of the areas where we were trying to sort of like instill confidence in the AD mode and the activity that happened there. So yeah, but it, in the early stages, I can see something like that, let's say, being required just to tell people more confidence. And some of the work that we're doing in the future, particularly in the urban environment, people will want to know, why is it doing this activity? And one of the ones I can quote is, turning right at a mini roundabout. Do you follow the highway code rules, or do you actually turn right like a human does? Let's say round a roundabout. And then how do other people interpret, your actions or the actions of an autonomous vehicle? So these are all things that that will need to be, let's say, reviewed and looked at. Okay. Question for Natasha. So quite a quick, what AV controller was used for the off-the-shelf case?
Yeah, I can't possibly name it. It was just one that is already, the algorithms in published work. I can look up and send you the details, or it may very well be in the published paper. But we just, I wasn't involved on that side of it, but it was just an off-the-shelf controller. Yeah. That basically follows the center of the lane and cannot cope with obstacles in the road.
And what were the results of using the HRV while you're online? Good
question. So we looked at RMSSD for that, and basically it's the relationship is the other way around to SCRs, but it's not as reliable. So really, the SCRs were the most predictable and reliable.
Okay, so one for both of you here. AV goals are to create harmony on the road. Is it required to consider individual aspirations of driving pleasure? Isn't this a conflict of interest?
Natasha, do you want to take that first, or shall I go?
You're on mute, Natasha.
Sorry, I'm having some background noise, so I'm just going to try and read the question, or maybe you can repeat that, Bob, please.
Yeah, AV goals is to create harmony on the road. Is it required to consider individual aspirations of driving pleasure? Isn't this a conflict of interest?
Yes, I mean, this is a very good question, which does come up all the time. I guess it's around, what is safe and what is pleasurable, etc. And I think this is more on the ethics side of things. But basically, we are not here to. I don't think driving is necessarily about a pleasure. It causes deaths, and so we've got to be very careful to balance that with safety. And obviously, safety wins every time.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Ellie.
You can go first if you want, Jamie, but I was going to sort of add some of the comments that we picked up from the interviews after the demonstrator.
No, you fire away first.
Thank you. So we actually found after the experience of the demonstrator that people did consider this, and they were like, well, actually, this is how I like to drive and I like to rush around town. But really, is that the right way to drive? And actually, would our stress levels be much better if we all drove the same in the safest manner? That might be the most efficient way of driving. So it's quite interesting that there is interest from the public that actually the road safety does improve, and we design systems to enable that, which I think is positive.
Okay, anything else from you, Jamie?
Yeah, I think it's something that could be controversial in the sense that it depends on how the systems start to be designed and how the intentions of either the vehicles or the algorithms and let's say the utopia is this harmonious kind of system that flows beautifully, and then actually, as you say, transport just becomes a mode. Cars become just a mode of transport. You just use it because it's almost like a tool that gets you from A to B, and then you start asking some of those questions about the social responsibility of, well, will it get to a point where you say driving pleasure, it's no longer socially responsible to drive a manually driven car anymore, and that you should do it somewhere where you can drive more recklessly, or sort of having that either an airfield or almost like that horse analogy, where horses aren't being ridden really on the main roads, and you now go to a centre and you ride a horse, and you sort of care to your horse there. Actually, cars might end up heading that sort of direction with autonomy coming in terms of manually driven vehicles.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. So another one for you, Natasha. You focus so far on rural and urban roads, but it is likely that automation will come first to limited access highways. Will you be extending the work to those facilities, e.g. proximity to vehicle in front, how overtaking is conducted? And do you have any comments about highways based on your current work?
So I was just about to type my response to Graham. Great question. In HumanDrive, we were particularly keen on looking at rural and urban because lots has been done on highways. So we were aware that not a lot had been done, and certainly the Nissan Drive very much looked at going from in all of the possible environments, because it is tricky and it is challenging, and our roads and our roundabouts, etc. No one's, I guess, been brave enough to look at it. So we did want to focus on the urban and rural in particular. But your questions around the highway side of things are absolutely relevant, Graham, and certainly something I know Chen is listening. So that's something we can certainly look into in her PhD and look at those particular scenarios and use cases for more information. But I would say that based on what was making it uncomfortable in the studies that we did, factors like changing lane on the highway and how that is achieved would be one aspect to look into more detail.
Okay, thank you very much, Natasha. So, question here, many organizations make big claims about the amount of time spent in AVs that would be reclaimed for productive uses, work, lunch, whatever. Do your studies of comfort provide any insights as to the circumstances in which these claims might be true or false, especially in the UK?
Great question, Nick. Should I answer? Sorry.
Both. Let's say.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think again going through kind of linking Graham's and Nick's question, it feels, and this is sort of aspects of which I haven't necessarily thought about, but I'm thinking about it now, how actually it seems to suggest on the highway with maybe less sort of changing lanes and less curvature, etc. It feels like, yes, it is going to be more comfortable, less discomfort in terms of motion sickness, etc. And so once everything else is set up nice and ready and safe, Nick, and you know what I mean by that, then yes, I would have thought that it's easier and feasible to see this happening on the highway, even in the UK.
Yeah, I can add to that some of sort of the participants' responses. So I agree, it needs to probably be sort of a smoother road like the highway. We got quite mixed responses. Some people were really keen to be able to sort of engage in other activities, particularly for the commute to work. One interesting comment was someone who enjoyed doing road trips, wanted to actually sleep in his AV and then arrive somewhere exciting in Europe and sort of play around with the car. However, we did find a number of responses that people were concerned that they said, actually, there's not that much that you can even do on a train, and it might be just looking out the window is quite interesting to keep themselves content. But sort of reading and things like that, people were concerned, and they were concerned about sort of the safety aspects as well. So I think one lady suggested like I love knitting and I'd love to be able to do that more, but it's dangerous to do that in a car today. There is obviously that associated risk if something did go wrong. So I think that was interesting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, was motion sickness assessed during the on-road simulator trials? Do you think it may impact participants' perception of comfort? I think one for you, Natasha, in your simulator.
Yeah, so we had, well, it says on-road / simulator, so yes.
So yes.
Okay, so very briefly, this was the first study that we ran in the driving simulator where we created such a rich variety of environments. So I've been using the driving simulator for couple of decades, shows how old I am, and we tend to stick with highway driving because actually that's, you know, the work isn't around the environment per se, but other things like distraction, etc. Here we were looking at the environment, and that was the biggest challenge, and we had to go back to the drawing board again and again. What we wanted to do, for example, high hedges, it was one area that we wanted to see what does that feel like in terms of comfort. Threw that out because it's just horrible being in a narrow road and seeing those high hedges go past you in simulation. Nasty. So we really kind of went down and down and compromised. We still had a lot to test, but we also, the other thing that we did was we brought in people who we had asked to drive manually and they didn't feel ill, and we brought them back again for the automation side because we knew they were not, they didn't suffer. But normally at the University of Leeds driving simulator, we have like a very, very low number of dropouts for simulation for various reasons. So yeah, this one was challenging.
Jamie, do you want to add, or?
Well, in terms of our on-road, I mean, we had a number of situations. Some of the original trials that we did included a lot more sort of passes round roundabouts and the impact of sort of say a small vehicle travelling around sort of a number of rotations and then sort of continual sort of turns and not getting up to sort of a longer cruise or long straights. So we found that there was certainly for us when we were in the back, a lot of motion sickness for us when we were actually writing notes and trying to take down information. So we were experiencing that firsthand, actually, the impact of what cues that you had available to you and being able to sort of reference either the horizon or sort of the outside world. So in that respect, I mean, we did ask for feedback around motion sickness, and people offered up that kind of response as to how they felt about the drives. Yeah, I think in particular there were a couple of people who were susceptible to motion sickness that kind of said, look, you know, I'm quite sensitive to this, so please be aware, and this is bringing it to the fore. And I think it'd be an interesting one to find out how you mitigate those, and you know how we, as I mentioned about some of the opportunities for different ways of either tricking the vestibular system and providing different kinds of feedback to the user to draw them away from that feeling of nausea. Ellie?
Yeah, I think sorry, I did just drop out, so I hope that I haven't repeated anything. Just rejoining my connection. I think during the actual autonomous demonstrator, there wasn't many experiences of motion sickness at all. It was obviously quite a slow, sort of shorter environment and quite a benign environment that we did the test in. But there was one participant who attended knowing that they were likely to experience motion sickness and that they drove themselves predominantly. And that was their biggest fear, really, with autonomous vehicles. They were quite excited about the idea, but their fear was motion sickness. And although we did have some experience of motion sickness during the trial, the responses after from that participant in the interview was that they could see that actually it wasn't as bad as what they thought it was going to be. And they thought it was really, really promising that this research was happening and that designers and developers were thinking about this in terms of sort of acceptance and interest in autonomous vehicles.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got one more question here. Sorry, yeah. How well could the AVs replay the manual drive? You know, which metrics did you use to quantify that the replay was actually replayed?
So that was actually literally recording the driver's driving and replaying that exact drive back to them. So it was 100% their drive. I hope that makes sense, Sarvish, but I can chat with you more later if you need to.
So for the study that that I mentioned before, we actually had some expert test drivers go out in the vehicle to run theirs, and their responses when the vehicle, they had to choose, but they already knew which was theirs and which was in the AV mode. And they were able to comment on how accurate that driving scenario was as well on the actual physical road. So yes, yeah. So in our case, the metrics was the actual driver who confirmed, let's say, that the scenario was correct. So yeah, on there. Okay then, on there, and I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to ask this one question, then ask the panelists, the two panelists, let's say CPC and Leeds to summarise. Okay, so last question here: what type of comfort metrics have been looked in relation to AV beyond the riding and biometric variables?
So that's it for now. We've used a standard car so far. We haven't gone further into looking at different types of internal setups or anything like that yet.
And so for us, our trials were, as you mentioned, it was a standard car and a standard seat that was kitted out for the trials. So there weren't any sort of different modifications or adaptations to the vehicle in terms of comfort there. But an area of interesting development for sure, as I mentioned in my presentation about opportunities for vehicle design.
Okay, there's a few more questions there about confirming some numbers and that. So if I ask the panelists if they can respond, let's say to those responses there. But just to summarise, let's say I'd like obviously Jammie and then Natasha just to let's say summarise what new and novel methods are being used to capture comfort, and how easy do you think it would be to achieve true comfort on the roads? So if I ask Jammie that question, those two questions first of all.
So new and novel techniques. Yeah, thanks, Rob. New and novel techniques. So we're starting to explore things around virtual reality and simulation and modelling to look at different ways at which the autonomous control systems might be performing under different circumstances, looking at different scenarios and use cases, and quite interestingly the corner cases, and trying to explore what are those difficult and exceptional situations, and how will a vehicle respond or perform under those circumstances. So that's kind of the main sort of new techniques, certainly on Vericav. That's some of the approaches that we're adopting at the moment. Natasha, I don't know if you want to.
So yeah, I think I'd like to investigate further this skin conductance response, and if we can find a less intrusive, easier to set up device for measuring accurately. So we used Empatica in the past, but it's not very accurate. Then that could be nice to look at, sort of whether how comfortable or uncomfortable drivers are feeling as the AV changes its behavior. So I think there's definitely work to be done there.
I think another one that I forgot to mention is eye tracking as well, and starting to to look at different fixation points and trying to understand what are the different things that people look at to either get a greater level of ease or reduce their discomfort by, what are the different bits of information that we do use to anticipate and to develop our understanding of situational awareness.
Okay, I'm conscious of the time, and my internet is just starting to play up, so so I'm a bit wary that. So from my side, I'd like to say goodbye before it changes. But on that, I hope everybody, let's said enjoyed today's event. We'll continue to answer some of those questions as let's said, and get back to you. And I believe the events team has already messaged everybody that you'll receive an access to the recording of this event as well today. So on that note, oh, sorry, Natasha.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that paper and information is open access. So lots of questions on the technical side around acceleration, jerk, etc. Really nicely described in the paper. But obviously, if you have more questions, just email me, please.
Any closing comments from you, Jammie?
As I say, our paper is also available at the moment. We're really interested in continuing to explore this. I've mentioned a number of the